Hello, 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 and welcome to the Global Footballer Podcast with me, Deepak, and with me is Monish.
Hi Deepak. So today we talk about the Premier League games of the last week. A lot of things happened last week. A lot of interesting issues on field, off field. I think the discussion is still going on. So do you want to start out with the big one, with the game with a lot of discussion after that, Liverpool and Spurs? What do you think first about the game, Deepak? Liverpool performance, Spurs performance?
Yep, Monish, I think there's only one place to start, and that is the game between Liverpool and Spurs. Liverpool were very unlucky. I'm not the biggest fan of Liverpool, as you probably know, and I'm not a biggest fan of Jurgen Klopp as well. But they were extremely unlucky in that game, especially with that VAR goal. Now, I think we need to discuss VAR in detail. I told you, Monish, at the beginning of our podcast that the PGMOL are completely twisted and they are almost running a dictatorship, and they've just absolutely clueless bunch of idiots, is what I think of them. And I have no idea how they effed up so bad. It has to, it has to, it has to account for something, and they have zero accountability, which is what infuriates me more than anything. The referees can do whatever they want, and zero accountability. And the moment somebody like Jurgen Klopp or any of the other managers talk about it or even criticize it, they are fined, given huge fines. uh, what is this? If somebody makes horrible mistakes like that, the person on the receiving end of that mistake should be able to even at least voice their opinion out and say that was wrong. That's not allowed now.
So first, I think I'll just start a bit about the game. Spurs scored twice. Liverpool scored once. That's all that matters at the end of the day. I mean, I know there's some talk about the replay. I think that's hogwash. That
I
doesn't
don't
make
think
sense
that's
at all.
happening. Yeah,
Not even happening. It shouldn't happen.
it
See,
shouldn't. Yeah, I agree. I agree. It shouldn't. Yeah.
let's start from the beginning. Spurs, the first red card, I don't think it was a red card. The second red card for the player to go in with a tackle, for Yota to go in with a tackle when he was substituted for Gakpo and on a yellow card, was completely stupid. So for just attempting that tackle, he deserves a red card. All right.
Yeah, I
The
think it
first
was a
goal,
stupid tackle to attempt when you're already on a yellow.
exactly.
Completely agree.
Richarlison, the first goal, well taken. Gomez was at fault. There was another chance, a goal in which Richarlison moved just a shade too early. That was not given for offside. Again, Gomez was at fault. Liverpool has a problem in its right back position. Just apart from VAR, they have to accept that, then they have to work on that. Number one. Number two, Liverpool played well. They had a well taken goal by Gakpo. Unfortunately, got injured immediately after. Moving on to two. Now, the first contentious decision, I think the first red card was a bit too harsh. But again, that has been given. In fact, even lighter tackles have been given for the Chelsea game just last week.
Yeah, no, I
More
agree. I don't have
importantly,
much of an issue with that first red card. I think
ex-
you're right. It's very debatable on whether that's given or not. Some people or some referees might consider that he stepped on the ball and the ball, his foot ended up rolling over the ball and then planting onto Bissouma's leg. So he didn't actually mean to go for Bissouma, but it happened as a consequence of him stamping on the ball. But I think not every referee needs to see it in that light, and it is a gray area, so it's fine. I think people can be sent off for that. But the more pertinent decision here is that offside goal after that, I guess.
so the question about the offside, number one, was it an offside? Everybody in the world agrees it's an offside. The problem was
Everybody
not in the
agrees it's an
decision.
offside, or
I mean, it was not an
if
offside,
it was
sorry.
not an offside, yeah,
And it was a goal.
yeah,
But the problem with it wasn't the decision that was it an offside or not an offside. The problem was the communication, like we had just now.
yeah.
The problem was, I think, because of the pressure to try to keep the game in flow, the VAR decisions. Now, I mean, now we are gonna veer off here, Deepak. We both follow cricket. You see how the third umpire decisions are made. Again, cricket is a stop-start game,
Yep.
but there is a clear decorum for it, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
First,
Yep.
what do? They check what is your on-field decision. Next, they say, okay, this is done. This is done. This is a checklist. It's beautiful to listen to.
Yeah.
It's like a
Yeah.
checklist. From our background, we know how a workflow, how a flow diagram works, isn't it? So you check, okay, fine, it's in line, it's pitching in line, the player is in this thing, there's no ball, you check for that first. Okay, all three, it's out. That's how clear it is. There's a sense of drama to it in cricket because it has been used otherwise for announced for from time immemorial. I mean, from 30 odd years, I
I
think.
think that's a
So
very
the problem
valid
here
point that
is
cricket follows the exact checklist in which the first thing on the checklist is what is the on-field decision, and they
in
confirm
decision.
on-field decision is this and this. Now
Exactly.
checking that decision.
A- and it comes up on the
Yep,
screen. On-field decision, it comes up on
yep,
the screen. All right, and then they check for the no ball. They check all the other variables also before even they go into the delivery per se, making sure about the legality of the delivery.
yep, yep.
This is so. What happens in football is, I mean, you heard now that the whole conversation came out. It seemed so rushed. It was like someone was pushing him and telling him, like, he's just having a burger and like, listen, just tell us what this is. Like, oh yeah, it's this, it's this. Okay. And I heard, I mean, if you listen to the conversation clearly, the person who was managing the video was actually trying to tell him to pinpoint that, listen, the on-field decision is this, but
Yeah,
he wasn't
that
registering
was the
it.
craziest thing for me. The
So
only
the
person
human
who actually
error,
found out the error and was asking the referees to delay the game was not even a referee. This was a sports scientist who had passed out from Loughborough in Leicester, and this is a guy whose only job is to make sure the videos are relayed and lines are drawn and things like that. He's not even a referee, and he's the only person who found the mistake out. It talks a
so
lot
the
about the
problem, that's what
PGMOL. I feel it just shows how big a bunch of clowns PGMOL are.
see, I'm not saying that. I mean, I won't talk about. I'm always for referees because if I think if you put a lot of pressure, it's going to be more problematic. I'll tell you this. I'll come to that a bit later. Now, the problem here is the communication. There was no problem in parts of the technology. There was no so people complaining about VAR, the technology was
Yep.
fine. The decision making also was not wrong. If you come to see it, it is just the communication that went wrong there. And what
Which is a
what
massive
was the
mistake.
problem there? The problem was, yes, it was a massive mistake, and it was basically the checklist not being followed. Now coming to Liverpool's reaction, all right, they had a problem with it. I agree that they had to go and question the referee because this problem keeps happening. Have to make sure it's fine. But repeating it again and again, it is. I felt it was an overreaction on their part because right now they calls for the referee not to officiate any Liverpool games. The referee was not biased, and if you keep doing this, other referees are gonna be like they're gonna be scared to even officiate Liverpool games. Isn't this putting undue? Sir Alex Ferguson was always blamed for putting undue pressure on referees. Isn't this putting undue pressure on
I
referees?
completely
And
agree.
let me
Just
tell you
putting
this:
undue pressure.
Ange Postecoglou after the game he mentioned he didn't know about it. Then he went through and he said that I agree that okay there was a mistake. This was a communication error. Unai Emery mentioned the same thing. He said there were more mistakes before VAR than after VAR. The problem with VAR is not the technology here. The problem was the whole issue with VAR. All the headlines are about VAR. What was the issue here? It was communication. The problem is there's no clear checklist. That's what PGMOL has to do. They should have done it right now. Especially, I mean, Britain has always been a place where they always have checklists. I don't know why they didn't have it
Yeah,
managing
no, I agree.
refereeing games.
Usually, British pride themselves on having a protocol and a flow
Sticking to
sheet and
protocol and
a
not even
guideline and
moving away
everything
from
else.
protocol, whatever
But
happens.
yeah, no, I agree. But the protocol doesn't seem to be obvious here, and people are just shouting over each other. So first of all, there doesn't seem to be an obvious consensus on how every decision is managed. It just seems to be let's rush through it to save time as much as possible. Because let's face it, previously VAR have been criticized for being too slow, and I think to compensate that, they are now trying to speed up decisions as much as possible. But obviously, when you're speeding up decisions to an extent that you're forgetting what the actual decision is and then just going through the motions, then this is what happens. I think VAR is struggling to find a good zone, a sort of Goldilocks zone in between making rush decisions and making extremely slow and poor decisions. I think it's really having trouble. And the offside rule, along with Hawkeye showing if the ball was uh, beyond the goal line, has been two aspects of VAR which has not been very subjective. It is an objective thing. Okay, the ball goes beyond the line. There are cameras out there. It will tell you if the ball has gone above the line and it will bust the referee's watch. Fine, that's a goal. And even with offside, If somebody draws the line, obviously it is up to that exact person on where the line is drawn. That is a subjective element, but the lines are all straight. The lines are drawn, and if you're 1 centimeter ahead of that line, it's offside. Doesn't matter whether you're a whole foot ahead of that line. If you're 1 centimeter above that line, offside is offside. So that has always been an objective thing for VAR. But with this decision, it just shows with bad communication, a massive error can be made. And for me, it's the trust in the whole process. If this has happened now, I'm sure it must have happened in the past as well. Just because it's not been blown up to this proportion and it's not been a massive game like this one, it's perhaps not got enough, enough limelight. So that's probably why it's not come out in the open yet.
Do you think Liverpool has managed to bring the VAR issue into the limelight and sidestep their problems at right back?
Jurgen Klopp's
Klopp is milking
exactly.
it. He's milking it. Sorry,
I
he
completely
is.
agree with you. He is, but immediately after the game, I thought of respected his answer because he said nobody did it on purpose. But we should be able to just say that things have been done wrong without my bank balance being affected. That's all we are asking for. VAR just needs to have a long, hard look at themselves. I don't want to pile on because I'm sure that ref sitting in VAR must be feeling really bad about himself. He said that immediately after the game, which was a
Yeah,
reasonable thing to
that's
do.
correct.
Exactly, it's completely fine.
And after the,
But
but after
after
that,
that, oh
calling for
yeah,
the
he's
replay.
been milking it. Oh my God, the replay and everything else that
Seriously,
he said is putting, as you said, undue pressure on the referees. It
yeah,
what it
he.
does sort of cleverly is that the next time there is a 50-50 decision regarding Liverpool,
It's going to
it's
go Liverpool's
definitely
way.
going to go Liverpool's way. 100%. Anything in the future is going to go Liverpool's way.
Unless the referee is a bit of an arrogant bug like me, and then just put it against them because he's just milking it.
Yeah, we can all hope for that, but I don't know how realistic that's going to be. But everything
Yeah,
from now on is
true.
going to go Liverpool's way. So Klopp has been milking it big time. Um, I just don't understand. I'm really annoyed with the referees trying to be the biggest person in the room. Listen, your job is to referee and get out of the way. You are not the star here.
True.
You are just there to do your job, melt into the background, and do a job diligently and efficiently. It's not about you. You don't need to make it all about yourself. But unfortunately, what's happened over the past couple of years, especially with all these rule changes, is that the referees seem to have sort of autonomy on everything that's done without a back and forth conversation. And if you listen to any previous professional footballer, there was always a lot of banter between referees and footballers on the pitch, in the tunnel, before the game, after the game. That's just been taken off now. Players are supposed to behave like robots. They're not supposed to kick the ball. They're not supposed to touch the ball. In These are all things which players have been used to doing for years, decades now.
See, Deepak, I digress there. I digress. Why? Because the players keep changing. Those players are already retired. It's a new bunch
Yeah,
right
but
now. When Hawkeye came, let's start with when Hawkeye came into cricket. There was a lot of issue
mm,
about it. They said it's not 100% foolproof. If you remember, for the longest time, India and Sachin Tendulkar were against it for the
yeah.
longest time before it was forced on them. The same will happen with football. People are going
No,
to be against the
I'm
whole
so
use of
just for the
technology.
record, I'm not
The
against VAR
players,
at all.
yeah,
I agree with
no,
you that there
yeah.
were more
Now,
bad
now
decisions
moving on
before.
about moving on about referees, I think somewhere the referees now at that time there was banter. Most of the communication did have happen in English, isn't it? Right now the teams are multicultural with different languages. Maybe some players would feel that if the referee is just talking to somebody else, they're not listening to them.
I don't
That
think
might come
that's a
into the picture.
factor
I'm
at
just
all.
saying.
The referees currently what they feel is
But more,
forget all the banter and everything else. My biggest issue is with two rules
see,
that were made this season. One, the decision to card any player for even accidentally kicking a ball away or not stopping for a whistle or whatever. And this has impacted every single club in the division. I'm sure, I don't know whether how big it's in fact to Manchester United, but for most of the
it has
clubs,
an
we have
impact on
players
everybody.
who are on at least 4 yellow cards, which means another yellow card means they're going to be suspended for a game. And we are not even through one third of the season. you're getting players suspended for that. That's one. The second issue I have with the rule book is with regards to the added time that's getting added on at the end of each half. Now, this is supposedly to prevent teams from wasting time. But if you look at, and the statistic that was used to justify this was the average ball in time for last season, which was about 54 or 55 minutes. Now, for a 90-minute match, 55 minutes seems excessively low if you look at that stat in isolation. But if you go back to even 2000, from 2000 till 2022, whenever the stat was measured, the average ball in time has been between 50 to 55 minutes. And that's just how football is played, because the clock doesn't stop every time the ball goes out for a goal kick or a penalty kick or a free kick or whatever. The ball doesn't stop. So using just this metric and then adding on time is causing so many injuries. Obviously, Manchester United are struggling with injuries. We are struggling with injuries. Every club in the
City
city
as
is
well,
struggling.
yeah.
Every club in the division is struggling with injuries because players are playing almost twice the amount of time that they used to in every match, which is madness. You can't do such laws. Even the UEFA president said, I think somebody asked him before the Champions League started, are you going to take the rules from England with regards to adding on time at the end of each half? And he said, that is the most stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm not going to do that, which I felt was a good way to look at it. I just don't understand these laws.
Now, adding time also means longer VR stoppages will not be. I mean, if you want to shorten the time, now VR also has to be taken into account. I'm more worried about the decision being made correct rather than the decision being made quickly in terms of VR. About the law about carding people who kick out the ball, I agree with you on that. About the time issue, I have seen people sometimes overdo it. There should be a way to penalize them. Maybe I rather have a player yellow carded for wasting time rather than
Yeah,
something else.
exactly. No, I don't
I
have a
think
problem
at,
with
at one
carding
time
players for that.
at one time the diving laws were much
Yeah,
more
yeah.
stricter, and then now if you notice they have scaled it back quite a bit. I think they should go back to probably making a bit more stringent diving law. But then how do you know if a player is actually injured or not? They might just go out, act fake something, and come back. And what if you simply card a player who finally has a ligament tear? There are no clear answers there. Anyways, that's about Liverpool and Spurs. Deepak, what do you think about Spurs otherwise? Good team, good
Yeah, I
game.
think Spurs were
They're
really
looking
good.
better.
The only problem, obviously, with Spurs was even when Liverpool were down to 9 men, they found it difficult to break them down. They were not playing the kind of football that a team should be playing against 9 men, which is to spread the pitch out wide, pull players in all directions, switch flanks every now and then, pull the Liverpool defenders back and forth, and then try to find a gap and score. That's how teams play against 9 men, because obviously when you're playing against 9 men, all 9 of them are going to be camped in their own penalty box. But
But then when it's Liverpool, don't you think it's always this fear that they can always counter attack
yeah,
and
but
steal
even
in and score a goal?
Darwin
Because
Nunes would have been good for that,
just
but he didn't even. I don't know whether he came on, but even if he did come on, it was very late in the match because Jota had gotten sent off. The person who actually
but what I'm
got
trying
him.
to say is to Newcastle's detriment, they know the problems with not changing your playing
Yeah,
style
no, I agree.
against
If it
Liverpool,
was
because when
10
they go
men,
all in for
perhaps
it.
that risk was always there. But with 9 men,
Hmm.
surely you have to go for it
Yeah.
then. There's no. But they got their reward finally. It was through one of these maneuvers in which they ended up extending the pitch and then crossing in from the right flank. Matip had a loss of concentration at that point and put it into his own net. Great finish though.
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad for Matip. He had a good game otherwise. So that's it about Liverpool and Spurs. I want to move on to the.
Yep. Le-
Uh, that's it about Liverpool and Spurs, and that's it about
Yep.
VAR.
Let's move on to the other big story from the weekend, which was Manchester City losing once in a blue moon event.
Yeah, Wolves were actually due for a win against a big team. They have played well against Manchester United. They were playing well all through, and I think they probably were unlucky with their finishing or some decisions going against them. They deserved this. They played well. Manchester City, I kept hyping and bigging up Manchester City's bench strength. But I mean, I just, there's something that Pep said that actually hit me. Like, yeah, he's perfectly right. When you think about bench strength, Manchester City has the best bench because they have players who cover 3 or 4 positions, but they do not have the volume per
Mm.
se. And Pep mentioned that he does not want to have that volume. He does not want 10 unhappy players not playing at all. He rather have players he can keep playing and who can cover a few spots so he can keep rotating
Yeah.
them. But he's unhappy because he has to play them so often, and with first De Bruyne, then Rodri's suspension, there are issues. Manchester City, however, a good point about Manchester City with this game and even with the Champions League and what I've been noticing this season, Alvarez has really come of age. He is now, I think, taking over. They have found a gem in him, and he is every bit what he was hyped to be. He is probably, in fact, Foden has not been at the level I expected him to be. I thought he would take over when De Bruyne was out injured, but it seems to be Alvarez who's actually bringing up the change in games and bringing moments of brilliance. So good for him on that. The goal, Wolves were very tenacious. The forward pushed hard, beat a couple of tackles, and I think City's defense were actually caught napping. Even for the second goal, they could have actually been a bit more urgent, but they were being complacent. So complacency, and I think the game against Newcastle also hit them and affected them. So yeah, what about you, Deepak? What do you think about the game?
Yeah, I agree. I think Wolves took their chances really well. Also, Manchester City, I think it shows that the most important player in that team is Rodri. Without him, they just don't look like the Manchester City of the old. He plays such an important role in that team. He knows exactly where to be, when to be, whom to tackle, where to press. That is a quality that somebody like Calvin Phillips just does not possess, and it's in our heads we like to think Calvin Phillips is a 50 million pound footballer. uh, a downgrade is That's not much of a downgrade from Rodri to Calvin Phillips. He should be able to slot in and play exactly the same way. That just doesn't happen. Rodri, whenever he goes missing, the impact to Manchester City is massive. And
Do you think it's also because Calvin Phillips hasn't played much? He's always been injured, and Rodri had his bedding in time because Rodri has, the starting
Fernandinho,
there were a lot of questions asked about
yeah,
Rodri.
he came in
Yeah,
on a similar
but then
situation.
he slowly got used to the situation. And the second thing is, Gundogan not being there, suddenly City looks a little short of experience
Yeah,
in midfield.
possibly
It doesn't look good when your midfielders Alvarez, Foden,
Matthias Nunes
and
and
Calvin
Calvin Phillips.
Phillips, Matthias Nunes. Yeah, all of them are. I'm not talking. These might be experienced footballers, but they are very new. I mean, they're not that experienced, but they're very new to the City
Yeah.
system, especially Nunes and Calvin Phillips. So that
Yeah, I
has
think
obviously
Calvin
affected
Phillips has
them.
struggled with
But
injuries for sure. But Rodri is so good now that if you are substituting yourself, any player coming in for Rodri is going to find it very difficult to reach those levels. He is sort of the linchpin that's tying down the entire midfield and defense of Man City. So he puts himself in a position to stop counterattacks. He can sort of sniff out opposition attacks before they happen. He either commits a tactical foul or he wins the ball back, which is a sort of talent or sort of thing that only Sergio Busquets had, as far as I remember from recent past, and that's not a talent anybody else has had recently. Perhaps it's unfair on Calvin Phillips to expect that from Calvin Phillips because he's sort of a different player anyway. But it just shows when Rodri is not playing, City is not the old City, and I think it's going to tie in nicely this upcoming weekend when they play Arsenal without Rodri.
so what are your pick for that game? I mean, Arsenal look like the early contenders to City. Only last week I was mentioning that Arsenal have no hope against the City team, but with Rodri, and you had mentioned that Rodri being suspended will actually have a big effect. Kudos on that, right? Pick there, Deepak. So what do you think? Arsenal is going to beat City,
Yep, I
or
think so. I've got them winning the Premier League after all, so I think I should stick by my prediction. I think Arsenal probably going to win just because again Rodri is not there, and I think Rodri's importance cannot be understated.
I think it all depends on City's use of Haaland. They should start using him more often right now. I know they're trying to play a game where the whole attack is not centered on Haaland, but I think they should start using and playing more through him, more because they cannot control games the same way they did, uh, and I think they need to go for a direct approach, and he is the right player. I mean, he's probably the best striker in the Premier League, and with his frame and his physical attributes and his finishing ability, he should be able to really put a couple of goals past, and let's see what happens then. So I would say it's Haaland versus the Arsenal system, if it works that way.
All right.
Anyway, so that's
That's it
it
then.
for this week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Like, share, and subscribe. And see you next time, where we do a deep dive into Newcastle United and Manchester United. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
I think there